Chapter 5, Lesson 2, Essential Question. How can you use a model to divide a decimal by a whole number? Remember when working with decimals, either as models or base 10 blocks or quick drawings, that the square represents one whole, the long is 1/10, and this little circle is 1/100th. Looking at the investigation, I expect you to follow directions appropriately and quickly. Make sure that you press pause to work through the steps that you're told. Make sure that you have the decimal models and a pair of scissors. Looking at the problem. Angela has enough wood to make a picture frame with a perimeter of 2 4/10 meters. She wants the frame to be a square. What will be the length of each side of the frame? Underline what you are being asked to find and circle important numbers. You should have underlined what will be the length of each side of the frame, circled 2 4/10 meters, and then this part was kind of difficult. I circled the word square because we know that a square is a quadrilateral with 4 equal sides. And since we need to know the length of each side, we need to know that a square has 4 sides. We also need to take a moment, and the perimeter is the 4 sides added up. So if we take all 4 sides of a square added together, that should be 2 4/10 meters at the end. So now looking at step 1, it tells you to shade decimal models to show 2 4/10. I don't want you to shade 2 4/10. I want you to cut out 2 4/10 of your decimal models. Press pause while you cut out 2 wholes and 4/10. You should have cut out 2 whole squares and 4 of the thirds, so that there would be 4 rods, because that's 1 whole, 2 wholes, and then 4/10, which equals 2 4/10. So now step B is you need to share your model among how many equal groups? Our square gives us that answer, so we are going to be sharing it among 4 equal groups. C. Since 2 wholes cannot be shared among 4 groups without regrouping, you need to cut your model apart to show the tenths. So take these 2 whole squares and cut them in the vertical lines, so you should end up with 10 from each square. Press pause while you cut. If you cut them apart correctly, you should have 10 from one whole, 10 from another whole, and then your 4. So, how many tenths are in 2 4/10? Well, there's 10 from one, 10 from another, so there's 10, 20, and the 4, there are 24 tenths in 2 4/10. Now you need to share the tenths equally among 4 groups. Go ahead and press pause while you divide your tenths into 4 equal groups. After sharing your tenths into 4 equal groups, you should be able to answer this question. There are blank ones and blank tenths in each group. Do we have enough tenths to make a whole? How many tenths does it make to make one whole? It takes 10. Do we have 10 in our groups? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You should have 6 in each of your groups. So that means that there are 0 ones and 6 tenths in each group. So now we need to write a decimal for the amount in each group. and using the model to complete the number sentence. 2 and 4/10 divided by 4 equals what? We had 6/10 in each. So the length of each side of the frame will be 6/10 of a meter. Looking at the draw conclusions. I'm going to keep this picture up here just to see. So number 1, explain why you need to cut apart the model in step C. Why could we not have used just that full square without being cut apart? Write a sentence of why you had to cut apart your model. I said that I couldn't share 2 holes with 4 groups unless I regrouped them into tenths. Looking at number 2, explain how your model would be different if the perimeter were 4 and 8/10 meters. I gave you a sentence here to fill in. How would the model be different if the perimeter was 4 and 8/10 meters? Well, I want you to fill in, I would not need to blank the 4 holes. What would you not need to do to the holes that you had to do here? There's 4 groups, and how many holes do you start with? 4. So you would not need to cut or regroup the 4 holes. And if you need to draw a little picture, each group would have what in each circle? What would be the inside this group if there was 4 holes and 8/10? Well, we know right now, because if we don't have to regroup the holes, that we would have 1 hole for each, and then the tenths. 8 divided by 4, so 8 in 4 groups, there would be 2/10. You may go ahead and turn your page over. You can also use base 10 blocks to model division of a decimal by a whole number. You are just going to be looking at your pictures here. You are not actually going to be handling the base 10 blocks. So, Kyle has a roll of 3 21/100 yards long, roll of ribbon. He cuts the ribbon into 3 equal lengths. How long is each piece of ribbon? Press pause, underline what you're being asked to find, and circle the important numbers. You should have underlined how long is each piece of ribbon, and the important numbers are 3 21/100 yards and 3 equal lengths. So we are dividing 3 21/100 yards by 3. So step 1, use base 10 blocks to show 3 21/100. Remember that each one of these is a hole, so that's 1, 2, 3 holes, and then 2/10 and 1/100. So if we fill this out, that means that we have 3 ones. 1, 2, 3. We have how many tenths? We have 2/10, and we have 1/100. Step 2. It says share an equal number of ones among 3 groups. Remember, we're doing the 3 groups because it's been cut into 3 lengths. There is how many ones shared in each group and how many ones left over. In the picture here, I am going to draw 3 groups. So these squares are groups. My green squares are going to be my ones. So there's 1, 2, 3. And I did not need to regroup. So there is 1 shared in each group, and are there any ones left over? Because I've used this one, and this one. There is no ones left over. So now we're going to be looking at sharing the tenths. 2 tenths, because that's what we start with right here, is we have 2 tenths, cannot be shared among 3 groups without regrouping. We have to break them apart. So to regroup the tenths by replacing them with hundredths, that's what this part is showing. So if there's 2 tenths and we break them apart into hundredths, how many hundredths will we actually have? Well, that's 20, and then this is going to be 20, plus we still have this one right here, so there, so that was 20 plus our 1, so at hundredths we have 21 hundredths right now to share. Now if we look over here at filling in our step-by-step process, it says there are blank tenths shared in each group and blank tenths left over. Were we able to share any actual 10 rods? No. So there are 0 tenths shared and there are 0 left over. But how many hundredths do we have? We have 21 hundredths. So now step 4 is to share our 21 hundredths equally among the 3 groups. So even if you needed to draw the picture, we can have, I'm just going to recreate my 3 groups right here. Okay, and right now I am sharing my hundredths. I've got 5 in each group so far, so there I'm at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So now I've shared 21 hundredths. So there are blank hundredths shared in each group. How many are in each group? 3, 6, 7, 3, 6, 7, 3, 6, 7. They are equal. So there are 7 hundredths shared in each group, and there are 0 left over. So if we look at our groups, that means that each piece of ribbon is 1 whole and 0 tenths and 7 hundredths long, yards long. Let's take a quick glance at our math talk. Explain why your answer makes sense. I want you to write an expression or a sentence right here next to it as to why you think your answer of 1 and 7 hundredths would make sense. I used estimation to explain why my answer makes sense. I said that 3 and 21 hundredths is close to 3. 3 divided by 3 equals 1. 1 and 7 hundredths, 1 and 7 hundredths is close to 1, so it makes sense. Working on share and show problems 1 and 2, they want you to use the picture to complete the number sentence. Numbers 3 through 11, they tell you to use base 10 blocks. If you feel that you absolutely need them, raise your hand and I will come to you. I'm also going to show you quickly the way that long division works with decimals. Starting with number 7. I set up my division problem like any division problem, 3 and 78 hundredths divided by 3. I ignored the decimal and I worked out my division problem, and at the end I took my decimal and slid it straight up. I didn't count decimal places, I just slid it straight up. So in this case, the answer is 1 and 26 hundredths. You may now begin on the share and show. Remember, if you become stuck, please raise your hand, and I will come to you as soon as I can. If you finish, check your work. On these first answers, if you do not have the 0 right before the decimal, that is okay. If you have the 0 there, it's fine as well. Just make sure you have 1 decimal before your digit. If you got them all correct, work on the problem-solving problems. If you missed any, please go back and see if you can find your mistakes. Raise your hand if you are still in need of assistance.